This classroom was the same, yet different. As a third-year seminary student at the Emory University Candler School of Theology, I was beyond familiar with the Rita Ann Rollins building, room 421, but I'd never experienced a class quite like this. The professors in this classroom were some of the world's foremost experts in the subject of historically black colleges and universities, otherwise known as HBCUs. And like endlessly deep wells of knowledge, each of them was a scholar in the specific topic of the individual HBCU they represented. And yet here I was, one of two students in the classroom. My student status was designated by two key factors. First, as it currently stands, none of my college degrees have been conferred by an HBCU. Despite this fact, many of the lessons my professors taught resonated deeply with some of the stories that I had heard from my siblings and mother who had graduated from HBCUs. Their stories of unwavering support at every level of the institution, wrapped in a genuine familial environment, were a far cry from the periodic moments of isolation I experienced during those same formative undergraduate years. But second and most important, as a student in this classroom, I was swimming in a sea of newfound knowledge about HBCUs and other black institutions that allowed me to connect some dots. A deep sorrow overcame me when I was faced with the fact that the racial violence was so intense during the early development of some HBCUs that the physical architecture of campus buildings had to be altered in order to avoid the threat of arson and bombing. And I tried my best and failed several times to conceal the tears that welled up when I learned that the list of HBCUs has gotten shorter over the years. But that sorrow turned to pride when I was reminded that my ancestors organized among themselves and established black churches to worship freely, some of which served as the birthplace for HBCUs. And they didn't stop at churches and HBCUs. They went on to create businesses that gave black consumers a sense of dignity in a racially divided marketplace, and developed into economic engines that funded generation-defining justice efforts like the Civil Rights Movement. The collaborative and entrepreneurial spirit of black churches, black businesses, and HBCUs led to the emergence of an ecosystem of black institutions. And I've learned about that ecosystem in microform through my grandfather, a retired pastor in the African Methodist Episcopal Church that allowed his eldest daughter to attend one of its colleges at no cost, and an entrepreneur who operated a cleaning company that employed and paid black people a living wage. But there was something about the way my professors talked about the origins of these black institutions. Simply put, there was an unbreakable will, a moral compass about these ancestors that inspired them or even compelled them to create something, to make a difference and leave a legacy, even though they began with very little, or in some cases, absolutely nothing. The way my professors talked about the origins of black institutions sounded a lot like the way we talk about major companies in America today. It reminded me of the way we talk about Mark Zuckerberg, but before the metaverse. The college dropout who built a social media platform in his dorm room that completely transformed the way our parents stay connected. It sounded a lot like Steve Jobs, the son of working-class immigrant parents who was later adopted by another working-class family before joining Stephen Wozniak and building Apple computers. And it's noteworthy that Apple hasn't always been a company with $1 trillion market cap, but a company that clawed its way from near bankruptcy before becoming a household name with innovative devices that we cannot live without. The way my professors talked about the origins of black institutions sounded a lot like this story of this pair of South Korean immigrants in Los Angeles who worked as janitors. They pumped gas and served coffee to provide for their families before launching the one-time multi-billion-dollar fashion company we know as Forever 21. From humble beginnings and meager means emerged these major corporations that define not only who we are and how we connect with one another, but underscores the true essence of what it means to be American. In America, you can arrive penniless, but with hard work, dedication, and perseverance, at some point, you'll find prosperity. In America, you can arrive with nothing. You can come with absolutely nothing and become something. And by any objective measure, we would call these companies and many others like them improbable and stunning success stories. So just like Meta, just like Apple, just like Forever 21, Black institutions started with very little or next to nothing and became something. In this way, they are not only American, they are quintessentially American. They are quintessentially American. Black institutions were built by formerly enslaved people and their descendants, and they defied the odds. So let's be clear. There are no humbler beginnings than being shipped from your homeland, stripped of your identity, and brutalized in a new land. There's no greater sign of financial desperation than agreeing to work someone else's land in exchange for a portion of what is already expected to be a small harvest. And it's been nearly impossible to recover from the economic and political disenfranchisement through Reconstruction, Jim Crow segregation, and gerrymandering. The origins of Black institutions are rooted in and inextricably tied to the oppressive and extractive realities of their creators. And so even though we don't talk about Black institutions in the same ways that we talk about these major companies, it doesn't negate the fact that they face circumstances that could have and probably should have rendered them obsolete. But they're still here. Black institutions are quintessentially American. And by this standard, they are the shining example of what it means to be American. They're the shining example of what it means to be American. If nothing else, they should signal to us that the American ideal is alive and well. The question I ask myself is, if Black institutions are quintessentially American, and if they are the shining example of what it means to be American, well, just how well are they doing? Do they share the same success as the Apple computers, the Forever 21s, and the Metas of the world? And if not, why? I'm saddened to report this afternoon that Black institutions as an ecosystem are not doing as well as they could and probably should. According to 2020 economic data, Black-owned businesses fell at a rate 20% higher than white-owned businesses. And a secondary review of that same data found that Black people start businesses at a rate 20% lower than white people, largely due to factors such as gaps in inherited wealth and access to capital. Okay. Pew Research Center found that among the Black Protestants who attend worship services at least once a month, they had declined by 15 percentage points between 2019 and 2022, the highest level of decline among racial groups. And another survey conducted by the Hartford Institute for Religion Research discovered that since the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, the 95% of Black clergy who never considered leaving their congregations in the summer of 2021 had dropped to 64% by the spring of 2023. Again, the highest level of decline among Black, white, and multiracial congregations in the entire country. And then there's this downright puzzling case of the disparities between HBCU land-grant institutions founded under the Second Morrill Act of 1890 and predominantly white or PWI land-grant institutions founded under the First Morrill Act of 1862. And there was a clear stipulation for those states who were granted this land, literally given this land that was often forcibly seized from indigenous people. That stipulation was simply this: these states were required to provide an equitable distribution of state funds between their 1862 and their 1890 land grant institutions. So imagine the dismay if you are Fort Valley State University, the 1890 land grant institution right here in Georgia, when you learn that you have been underfunded by more than $600 million in the last 30 years alone, as compared to the University of Georgia, the 1862 land grant institution. And that same disparity is true for 15 other state governments that have underfunded HBCU land grants by a total of nearly $12 billion over that same time. Money that should have been made available to schools like Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University and Tennessee State University, both of which are owed roughly $2 billion each, never reached them and impeded their ability to grow and plan for the present and future. So critical activities like retaining and attracting faculty and staff who can bolster the institution's academic profile, or expanding and maintaining campus infrastructure like residence halls, are in many cases delayed and even more cases denied because of this imbalance of funding. What's even more concerning is that the reason these HBCUs aren't doing as well as they could be is because of America itself. Remember, the funding these HBCU land grants are supposed to receive should be coming from the very state governments that founded them. So if we step back for a moment, the first question that I asked was, how well are Black institutions doing as an ecosystem, given that they are quintessentially American? And the answer to that question is not so well. And that naturally led to a few existential inquiries that I hope to research more. What does it mean for HBCUs to be underfunded and underinvested in by the very state governments that founded them? And what does it mean for the ecosystem of Black institutions if one of its member institutions is unwell? And those inquiries led to a few harrowing philosophical questions about America itself. What does it mean? What does it mean? What does it say about America if you can come to this country? What does it say about America? What does it say about America if the very entities that prove your ability to deliver on the idea of being American are being killed? And what does it say? What is left of America if the ideal of coming to this country with nothing and becoming something is no longer attainable? Well, the best answer I can give really isn't an answer at all, but it is something that is as foundational to the Black church as the national anthem is to the American identity. It's the Negro preacher's clothes. At this point in the sermon, it is typically defined by the conclusion of the sermon and an invitation to either join the church, recommit to the faith, or request special prayer. And if you've ever been to a Black church, you know you've reached the close when the preacher says something along the lines of, "As I head to my seat," and either gets lost on the way or keeps preaching for 15 minutes. So as I head to my seat, I'd like to make a different invitation. An invitation that will encourage you to wrestle with this deeply philosophical question of America and its treatment of HBCUs and Black institutions writ large. I'd like to invite you to imagine America without Black institutions. Imagine the civil rights movement without the ethical posture of nonviolent protest. As one of my professors put it, the moderating influence of seeking justice over vengeance via the church goes away. And black communities around this entire nation have and continue to hold on to the hope of a more equitable future because of the black church's influence. Imagine this increasingly expensive and competitive nation without the innovative work of Paul Quinn College. As America's first urban work college, this HBCU in Dallas, Texas, provides students with opportunities to gain real-world experience and develop tangible skills, which helps to reduce their debt burden before they graduate. And so companies, major companies, Fortune 500 companies, they would miss out on students, future executives, being nurtured in a uniquely dynamic environment that can handle the challenges of the 21st century workforce. Imagine what Atlanta would be without Morehouse College, Morris Brown College, Spelman College, and Clark Atlanta University. The same Morehouse College that produced one of the greatest civil rights leaders in human history, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The same Morris Brown College that produced the education activist who built schools in North Carolina and created commencement activities and traditions that celebrated black academic achievement. The same Spelman College that produced former Emory professor and the new dean of Harvard's Divinity School, Dr. Marla Frederick. The same Clark Atlanta University, formerly known as Atlanta University, that produced the visionary lyricist who penned the poem Lift Every Voice. These are just a few examples of the caliber of scholar and pioneer that flow from HBCUs and lead in every field of human endeavor. Even though I didn't attend an HBCU, my life has been textured by black institutions. And even though you may have never patronized a black-owned business or sat in the pews of a black church, your life has also been textured by black institutions. And that texturing means something, especially to our imagination. The existence of these quintessentially American institutions encourages us to embrace the ideal that in this country anything truly is possible, that no hardship can hold us back. They also remind us that not all hardship is created equally, nor will it be addressed without joint effort. Nor will it be addressed without joint effort. There is work to be done. There is work to be done. There is work to be done to restore those who have been harmed by racialized violence from the very foundations of this nation. And there is action to be taken to ensure that the best of what we believe America is, or the best of what we hope America will become, is accessible to all its citizens. And if that texturing doesn't inspire us to work or compel us to action, then what really is left of America? Thank you.